As we continue our study of the book of Exodus, we look at chapters 5 and 6 and the first part of chapter 7. And this is sort of the prelude to the plagues. We don't get to the plagues yet, but we sort of get the setup for them. God had originally said that Moses should simply go to Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go that they might worship me." As we've mentioned, there's a little bit of a question exactly about whether this is kind of like a trick sounding thing. The Pharaoh gets a pretty good idea that the Israelites don't just want to go out into the wilderness, but that they really want to leave the country altogether, and that would be a financial impact for them. And so at this point, as the request has been made to let the people go, before Pharaoh starts getting harder and harder in his responses, the first element is that he assumes that the reason why the Israelites are complaining is because they are not working hard enough. Of course, that's kind of a ruse, but um, the real dilemma of chapters 5, 6, and the early part of 7, and what's going to go on really in the plagues as well, is that it would seem like this is a plan that is not working. First of all, Moses says, "I am not an eloquent speaker. I'm not going to be able to convince the Pharaoh of anything." Secondly, the Israelites are getting very, very angry at Moses and Aaron because the request to get them freed, which sounded so good at first, really was turning into a nightmare for them, and maybe literally a nightmare that they were out day and night trying to find the straw to make the bricks. And it seemed to be having the very opposite effect. Not that anybody would expect that the Pharaoh would say, "Sure, if you want to go, go ahead." When we even see something in a management and labor dispute like the airline strike, we're going to see that the two parties get harder and harder in their positions, and if you have to settle it, then mediators may come in, but they're probably not settling it because they want to, but because there's very strong pressure put on them from the outside. And if Pharaoh thinks that he is definitely in charge, then he is not going to believe he has to listen to anyone else. It's kind of like maybe the Ford Motor Company before they had a union, where all of those who were trying to call for unionizing were really on the enemy list of Henry Ford. And back in the 1930s in Detroit, they had riots where there were some who were even killed, and the murders were never solved or never even checked into a whole lot, those who had been involved in trying to fight against it. And that's a very common thing. Well, here's this 80-year-old Moses and this 83-year-old Aaron going to a mighty Pharaoh and saying, "Our people want to get out of here and we at least want to worship." Moses seems to try an argument that says, well, our God says he is going to strike us with plagues if we don't go out and worship him, so it is in your best interest, Mr. Pharaoh, to let the people go. How they got access and how all of that worked to come before the mighty Pharaoh, we're not told. But the result of it is the Pharaoh will have no one challenging his authority, and they simply say, "We're going to make the job harder for the people of Israel." Remember, not all of their work was just making bricks to build these storage cities. It's been mentioned already that they were also involved in farming, and so it may be that some of them who were doing the farming would have access to the straw. But it is certainly a much more difficult thing. With these bricks, by the way, we're talking about something that would be just plain clay, and the straw is put in to kind of give it support so that it won't fall apart as quickly, kind of like we do with concrete rods in streets and highways today when we're building concrete roads. So this is simply kind of something that will help hold the buildings together. They need that for sure. And they probably would have been a larger size brick, probably quite a bit larger than the kind of bricks we might see, maybe like a half a cinder block or something in size. The result of it is that Moses then complains to God. Sometimes you'll see this joke, this kind of sign somewhere where someone says, "Where did this plan go wrong?" And it's sort of like you can have all sorts of different places where this plan seemed to have gone wrong. I think that's an interesting kind of point to reflect on, though, that the church itself, as it carries out the Lord's will, where it says, "Go and proclaim not to Pharaoh, but to Satan and the world and our old sinful flesh that it doesn't win, that Christ has won the victory, there is going to be a hardening that comes as well. We're not ready for it. We're surprised by it. We're hurt by it. We often wonder whether it is even with any point to go on. We have second thoughts about ourselves and the way in which we try and live a Christian life when we say it doesn't seem to matter anyway. And Moses himself pretty much is saying to God, this is your fault. He's not really too far away from that in saying, God, if you hadn't cooked up this scheme, we would probably be doing better than we are now. Someone has once said present pests are worse than past plagues. And their feeling right now is the problem we have right now is really worse than before, kind of in reverse, that it wasn't so bad before and now it's gotten worse, and it's all because of something that we had no control over, the Israelites would say. So chapter 6 goes on and says there will be a deliverance. It's odd how the only thing that comes up here is the same promise that was given in Exodus chapter 3. I am, Yahweh says, I will deliver you. I didn't tell the ancestors Abraham and Isaac and Jacob who I was by this name, but I was watching over them. And I am going to deliver you. And therefore you have to live by faith in that promise. Now, the people at this time see things go from bad to worse. God says, I have heard your groaning, I have heard your complaining, and yet it would seem that for those individuals it was much, much worse even than it had been before, because now they had really antagonized the Pharaoh and turned him into a scorpion who's ready to bite anywhere he can. So the children of Israel, who are promised deliverance, seem to see none of it. That's often the way it seems in the church, where you start out believing that you are trying to do something good, and then it turns into something that seems just the opposite. The church needs to always ask the question, are we really going at the right objectives, or are we moving on to something that seems easier to do and maybe workable? So it may be we get into trouble because we've really barked up the wrong tree, but it is also the case that the gospel itself and the good news of freedom in Christ will antagonize those who see their power being threatened. And in our own personal life, it may be that the good news threatens our own person and that part of our old sinful nature where we want to be in control over others, as Pharaoh is. So anyway, God says, I have heard all of this, I am watching over it, I am in the process of making it happen. It's going to apparently be several months before the events take place to actually deliver them. And because of this, the mention of the seasons with the plagues, it would seem like it was a longer period of time with the early and late rains and whatever. But God says, I will deliver you. And then there is this genealogy. We get a kind of a partial genealogy at this point because it really mentions Reuben and Simeon and then goes on extensively into the family of Levi. Remember the family of Moses and Aaron. And the main listing is really to tell us about how Moses and Aaron are related to the descendants, or some of the descendants of Levi, the son of Jacob, and how they all fit into that whole family. It might be a rather shortened one if we're really talking about 400 years. But Moses once again will say, I am a poor speaker. And God says, well, I'm going to let Aaron be your prophet, and you will be like God to him. You'll be the one who puts the concept together, and then he is going to be your ad campaign. He's going to be your ad manager who is going to put the story out. Quite frankly, God is saying, it doesn't matter how you say it. No matter how it is said, the message will get through if it's the true message. And even if the message is a true message, it might result in another person being very irritated by it. But, and this is a very important kind of a concept to remember, not everyone who hears that message of God seeking to deliver someone is going to react as Pharaoh does. If that were the case, then no one would ever become a believer. And so we, in our day, never quite know whether we are going to have a good or a bad reaction to the message. That depends on the heart of the other person. It depends to some extent on the way in which we represent who God is. And here, God is saying, I want to deliver my people from trouble. Well, that's fine unless the person who is going to lose their support will be harmed by it. And obviously Pharaoh is interested in building these big storage cities so that he can store grain there and ship grain out and make a lot of money. But the upstart of it is that God says, every excuse that you come up with, I've got an answer for you, and I am really involved in doing it. So we get to chapter 7, and they go before Pharaoh. And they have made the requests before. Now we get to the initial miracles. When Moses had been at the burning bush, he threw down his walking stick and it became a snake. And then he picked it up again by the tail and it turned into the walking stick again. Now Aaron will do that with his walking stick, and it turns into a snake before Pharaoh. This is supposed to say there is some real powerful stuff going on, but we get the response that Pharaoh's magicians were able to do the same thing. What all of that means is kind of hard to determine, but there is this sense that powers of evil can also pull off some miracles, maybe even some very important ones. I'm quite sure from a variety of places in the Old Testament that the assurance of a sign worked when it was to assure someone who was weak in faith and not just quite sure, someone like a Gideon who sees the fleece wet one day and the ground dry around, and then the fleece dry and the ground wet all around. So some of the signs to believers seem to make a difference. But as we see with Elijah and the prophets of Baal, if a sign is given to an unbeliever, it will harden them. It will simply be something they have to fight against. And so we will see people who will reject every evidence of anything that's going on. And I think, quite frankly, that means that God sort of almost says to us, don't think that miracles are going to turn someone around. If someone's heart is against me and they are threatened by it, nothing is going to change their ways. So these miracles will happen, but at least initially the Pharaoh's sorcerers are able to do the same. It will be kind of laughable in the section of the 10 plagues that as the problems get a little bit worse for the magicians, they get so sick that they're too sick to come before the Pharaoh and try and do some of the later plagues. But at this point we see the initial events taking place, and as I've mentioned, it looks like it's going from bad to worse. There will be a lot more in terms of the problems of the plagues, and then finally the plague of the firstborn. All of this kind of a rather long setup to how deep the resentment and resistance is. The New Testament, in the New Testament era, as we think of sharing the faith, if we are unaware of the resistance to God on the part of unbelievers, then we will think, well, we can just mention something and everything will be all right. But there will be that resistance, and it is going to be very different if we're talking to an individual whom we simply want to say or tell they can be delivered from troubles, or when we are saying to some power group, you are in the way of God and you must be stopped. And the resistance that comes out there is going to be something where if it's within the church, then there has to be reflection on why is this resistance taking place. If it is outside the church, then we're going to have to recognize that Jesus is a threat to others. So this is a rather troubling section. God seems to go to act for the good of the people, and matters are made worse. We see the same thing, of course, in even a deeper level with Jesus and his disciples, where he goes to heal and love and care for the people, and the Pharisees and others and the Romans later will react in a very, very negative way to it. So it's time for reflection, time for all of us to evaluate when are we the people who are in our stubbornness really refusing to let God act in the way that he would act with others. And that that part of it is so very difficult because we ourselves, like Pharaoh, would justify who we are. It's because we are both saint and sinner that we need to reflect on that in our own life. God's continued blessings to you as you reflect on your own life and as you seek to be maybe not the best of speakers, but remember that the Holy Spirit works in and through you, and that it is not only that we are sent to antagonize, but that we are sent also to deliver people not just from bondage, but from eternal death. God's blessings to all of you as you continue. Thank you.